Looking at a series that we've titled Standing Strong, and it's really been about looking at characters, both men and women of the Old Testament, some that lived 4,000 years ago, and men and women of the New Testament, maybe a couple thousand years ago. And we found some common ground that while the centuries are quite separated by a significant distance of time, human life is human life, and as we saw and have seen their challenges and how they trusted God and stood strong in Him when things were chaotic, that we can learn to do the same thing. So this morning we'll be concluding our series, Standing Strong, and quite frankly, I can't think of a better way to conclude this series than to have Josh Lee bring the message. Josh is our junior high pastor. He's been on staff for a couple of years. He loves the Lord. He loves being a part of this church community, and he really enjoys talking about the Lord Jesus Christ, the Heavenly Father, and the Scriptures. And he's going to bring a word from the Old Testament today that I know will encourage you. Please welcome Josh Lee.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here today. Glad we can have a little conversation from me to crowd. Hopefully we have met before, everyone. If not, like Brian said, I'm Joshua Lee. I'm the junior high pastor here at the church. You may have kind of seen me wandering through the lobby carrying like a whole bunch of like shaving cream cans and pie tins, or like some strange weird contraption for junior high downstairs. I've been up here a couple times doing some of the announcements, so you might recognize my profile or something from side to side. Or maybe just in the church bulletin, you kind of look over on the left, and there's, like our staff photos, and maybe you've wondered, who's this young, attractive man? Oh, Chad Dusacco, great. Who's below him, though? Joshua Lee. Okay. He doesn't look Asian. But yeah, now we're friends, so now, you guys can call me Josh. If we were family, you'd either call me Josh or Josh Lee. We have to make the distinction because I know it can get a little confusing in my family's household. So, myself, I'm Josh. I'm married. Katie, she's right over there. Everybody look at her. She loves when I do this. Yeah, she loves it. So her real name is Catherine, and she actually has a brother named Josh. And so that's kind of one of the reasons we need a distinction. Josh, he wanted to make things interesting and decided to marry a Catherine. So now we have Josh and Catherine, Josh and Catherine. And so, the distinction is important, especially because my sister decided to not be outdone. And she, Jessica, decided to also marry a Josh. So we have Jess, Josh, Catherine, Josh. And it's a good time. But so we're thinking, what? We've got last names, though. Thank God for last names. So we can try to figure something out. However, we've got a Josh Hamilton and a Josh Heinrich. So they're both Josh H. So we can't do that either. So we have to figure something out. And, to make it even better, like it wouldn't be enough if that was just it. My dad's name is Steve, and in my family, it's like the dad's name is like the son's middle name sort of thing. So like my name is Steve, my middle name is Steve also. And my cousins, they call my dad Uncle Steve because he's their Uncle Steve. Katie, she also has an Uncle Steve. And so when we're with that side of the family, I hear Uncle Steve, and I start looking for my dad, and I get confused, right? Katie, along with an Uncle Steve, also has a grandfather Steve, too. So if our whole family gets together at Christmas time, we have up to 4 Steves, 3 Joshes, 2 Catherines, and a partridge in a pear tree. So it's a bit much, but we make it happen. I have been married to my wonderful wife, Catherine, Katie, for about 10 and a half months now. It's been great, and we are expecting that the next month and a half will be just as good, which is good. Oh, sorry. Sorry if that was confusing. That's something that should teach you in premarital counseling is like you can't say the word expecting anymore. Just don't do it. Like if we're in the lobby and someone's like, oh, hey, Josh, Katie, like what do you think that movie's going to be like? It's like, oh, yeah, we're expecting it to be great. 5 heads go, oh, like, So I know that's a tough word. I am a little bit about me. I'm currently at Biola University, going to Talbot Seminary School, getting my master's degree up there. Go Eagles! You're good. I got my undergrad from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Go Mustangs! Yeah. Okay. Nice. Ooh, yeah, got some wooers. Nice. And then before that, I just down the road was going to Laguna Hills High School. So go Hawks. There we go. Yeah. A couple Hawks. Great. So I went from being a bird to a horse to a bird again. And like I'm glad to be a bird again. I think it's just better that way. I was recently here at church because, I hang out here sometimes. And I was doing some work, and when like you get an email and you know you're not going to read the email like right when it comes in, it's like the thing you subscribed to, and like you don't have the heart to unsubscribe because you're like, well, I'm going to read those things, so you kind of keep archiving them and stuff. And so like I opened the email because it's like this youth ministry podcast that they're on like episode 38, and I've listened to one of them. But so I opened it so it wouldn't be like a little blue dot anymore in my email, and then I archived it with all the other ones that I haven't listened to. But it caught my eye, actually, and so it made me pause for a second. The title was like Empowering Student Leaders in Your Ministry. And it was like, I like empowering student leaders. That's cool. So I opened it up, and the podcast was 45 minutes long, so I didn't listen to that. But they had like a little Cliff Notes kind of thing with little timestamps, and I was like, perfect. So I was reading the Cliff Notes on the podcast. And something that I read, it totally hit me. And the context of it was they're saying how when you empower student leaders, they've got such amazing passion and ideas and everything. And the soundbite was, yes, because they still believe they can change the world. And that hit me, because it was like, oh yeah, they still believe they can change the world. Like, wait, when did I stop believing I could change the world? And I had to really pause and think about that. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I was younger, I was a child. And I wanted to be a professional baseball player. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be the king of the world because that would have been a thing in my future. I wanted to write a book, be an actor. I wanted to make my own comic books. Commander Cool, patent pending. I wanted to do all of these things, and unfortunately, I think like for you guys too, is as we've gone through life, like we've been beaten down in various things. Like you've realized, oh man, like I struggle with learning Spanish. I guess I'm not going to be, like bilingual. Like, oh gosh, like this math is way harder than I thought it was going to be. Or like, wow, I'm not as interesting with the ladies as I thought I was. Like whatever happens, like our dreams, they start slowly shrinking over time because we stop believing that we can change the world. There was a really specific time in my life where I really felt like this was kind of it. Like I didn't have dreams anymore. And I was working for a company called Digital Artist Management. And they're a great company, great people, nothing bad to say about them. It just wasn't a good fit for me there with them. But so Digital Artist Management, don't say the acronym out loud because we're in church. But so I was working there, and what I was a technical recruiter for the video game industry. So I, had engineering background, so I was an engineer that could talk. And so I would, I'm like kind of headhunting, recruiting these engineers for these, video game projects, whether they're like a programmer or doing like database stuff, or even maybe some artists and whatnot occasionally. But so I struggled a lot at this job because my thing was to find good, talented candidates that we could bring in and then sell to our clients. And you're finding people jobs. It's like, yeah, like I can find the next amazing designer, or someone's going to do some groundbreaking computer thing, and yeah, I can change the world kind of through that. And I would find these people who I was so excited about. I'd call them on the phone. They're telling me about this amazing doctoral program that they're in, like using like virtual reality to help people with like prosthetics and stuff, and like virtual surgery and everything. It's like, this is so cool. This is amazing. And I would bring these people to the table, and my boss and my coworkers are going like they don't have any job experience. Like they need to have these specific things. They need to have done this and this and this. And I'm like, yeah, they can do that, but like listen to their dream. And no one wanted to hear it. And that wasn't their fault. They're a company. That was their whole goal, is to get people jobs and stuff. But it was so hard for me because I'd find all these people that I saw the potential of, and then I'd be told they weren't good enough. And for myself, I would see the potential kind of in myself. And over time, I sort of just started feeling like I wasn't good enough, that I didn't matter, that I couldn't change the world. And so I stopped believing that I could. And so today I want to talk about a guy in the Bible. His name's Nehemiah. And I relate to him so much. Like thousands of years ago, he was doing the same thing I was. He was recruiting video game designers. And this is a guy who definitely, at one point or another, stopped believing that he could change the world. This is a guy who, because of his situation, because of what was going on, he felt so locked in to his inability to create change. Little background for him. He is an Israelite, God's chosen people. They, kind of had an up and down history and stuff. This is like the finishing end downer kind of for them. Like a little bit happens after this that we know about historically from the Old Testament. But Nehemiah and his people, they were in exile, right? They'd been conquered by the Babylonians and taken away from home. And so you can kind of see here up on the map, I've got a handy-dandy laser pointer. So we've got this region, we've got some ocean here, some land over here, so you guys know that. You can see Italy's boot over here, because that helps out everyone else. We got, Egypt and whatnot, and they're in the Persian Empire. And so a lot of this whole thing's going to take place in Susa, okay? So that's where Nehemiah is, and Jerusalem is over here, right? We can zoom in a little bit closer because it's a little hard to see. But so Susa and Jerusalem, they might look kind of close together. As like the crow flies, that's like 750 miles, but that's straight desert. So you got to go around that kind of through this Fertile Crescent area. And that's about 1,000 miles, basically, right? You can see right here, Memphis, Egypt is right there. I didn't know Tennessee was that close to to Jerusalem. Like, wow, we could practically walk there. And so, again, you can see Susa over here, and Jerusalem is right over here. And so that's where Nehemiah is. He's super far away, and he can't go home ever. They were conquered, they were enslaved, they were brought into exile by the Babylonians, and now he's stuck under the Persian Empire with a king who, he's a pretty good king, he's kind of intense at the same time. So kind of that's where we're starting off, right? So Nehemiah, he is in Susa, and he's totally stuck. We're going to get in the word real quick. So it's Nehemiah chapter 1, right at the beginning. It says, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Nehemiah's dad. Now it happened in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of this king's reign that I was under. The guy's name was Artaxerxes. In the 20th year, while I was in Susa, so remember the map, in Susa, the capital, it was one of the capitals of Persia. They kind of had a lot, like the summer capital and the winter capital. So he's in one of their capitals. Then Hanani, one of my brothers, and some men from Judah came. Oh, so exciting. Nehemiah, he's trapped in this foreign city and everything. He's lived there his whole life. He wants to hear news from home. Like, how are my people? How are things going? So these people show up. He said, I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped and survived the captivity. There were some people like me, but they're free. How are they doing? He's all excited about it. And he wanted to know about Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there, in the province who survived the captivity, oh my gosh, yes, just tell me what's going on, are in great distress and reproach. Oh, they're in great distress and reproach. And the wall of Jerusalem, the thing that protects our city, the wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are burned with fire. Oh, Nehemiah, he's so excited. I finally get some news from home. I can't call over there. All my emails keep bouncing back. He finally gets to hear, how is it? There's people that survived. They escaped. What's going on? And the news he gets is terrible. It isn't just bad news. It's oh no, there's some political upheaval or something. No, literally the wall is burned and gone. We're in great, great distress. Things are not going well. We're in trouble. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten a phone call or some terrible news that just hits you like that news would have hit Nehemiah. I have a couple times in the past year, actually. It's been a little bit of a doozy. But it was a few months ago, I got a call from my mom. My wife and I, we were out with some friends kind of over by the water in Long Beach. And I got a call. I didn't pick it up because, we were with people and stuff. And then she left a voicemail. So I take it out, and the voicemail, you can read the little transcripts things. You don't actually have to listen to it. I love that feature. But so I look at that, and it's like the worst voicemail to get. It's just, hey, something happened, call me back now. Oh, and you're just oh, I don't know, what that could be. I'm immediately thinking, my dad, Jess, Katie's with me, what's wrong, what happened, So, we get up, I grab Katie, because, she's my rock. And we leave the restaurant, I call my mom immediately, and, when your family members or a close friend or someone very well, when, they're, about to kind of break, basically. My mom picks up the phone, and I can just tell in her voice that it's something tough that she can't even really say, essentially. And so it's like, just tell me, like, what is it? And she says, well, it's your cousin Melanie. She just committed suicide. And she's on speakerphone. I look at my wife, and she's already got tears in her eyes because she's so wonderful and empathetic. And for me, I hear that, and I lock up, and I don't feel it as much in the moment. It's going to kind of hit me later. That's sort of when I'm going to break down. It's going to be later. And so and so when I see that, Nehemiah getting that news from home, and right after that, he just utterly breaks down in verse 4. When I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. He just broke. He just hurt, and there was nothing he could do. He was not at home. He couldn't go home. I got to fly over to Kansas, see my family, go to her memorial service, love on them, be loved on by others. He didn't get that. He couldn't do anything. He just broke on the floor, and he was fasting and praying. He wasn't hungry. He was hurting. And there was nothing he could do about it. He was a cupbearer to the king, and he had to go to work every single day with a big smile on his face, big upbeat kind of thing, because you didn't bum out the king, right? If you're in his presence, you are happy, so the king is happy. So he's got to create a mask for himself and walk into work every day and try to not show that he's breaking inside. And he had to just sit on that for months. The story will continue in a second, but for months, Nehemiah, he was just trapped in his head. He had to he was thinking, what can I do? How can I help the people who are hurting so much and that I'm hurting for myself? He ended up making plans with no ability to execute them. Right? He's thinking, what can I do? How can I help? Step 1, I got to escape from Persia somehow. Step 2, I got to go from Persia to Jerusalem somehow. Again, 1,000 miles across territory that he wasn't familiar with. He had to find investors, maybe, that could finance the wall being built. He had to get building materials somehow to Jerusalem. Again, the whole area was burned, so there wasn't a whole lot of wood around. He had to find workers to build the wall, and then he had to begin a project building the wall around Jerusalem that was specifically forbade by the king Artaxerxes that he is the cupbearer to. The guy straight up canceled a building project. He didn't want it to happen. Nehemiah had no idea what to do. All he had was hurt and this ideas with no ability to execute them. I want to sidestep for a minute and look at this king Artaxerxes. And to really understand Artaxerxes, we got to go 3 kings back, all right? So he's going to be number 4. We've got 3, 2, 1. First king I want to look at is this guy, Cyrus the Great, okay? Now, this guy was great. He, Alexander the Great, he was great, but Cyrus was really great. He was great before Alexander was great, so great, right? This guy, he was the best. He ended up conquering the Babylonians, no easy feat, and he created the empire of Persia to really bring it to the max. This guy, he conquered, he built, he did so much, but the craziest thing for him, he's sort of like Cyrus the innovator. This guy, he would conquer the people, but he didn't enslave them, which was totally groundbreaking for the time. No one did that. When you were a king and you conquered a people, you took all of their wealth, maybe you burned their city, and then you took the people because that was a part of the wealth you would win. He didn't do that. He came in, conquered, and he would sort of say he liberated the people from their other masters, kind of thing, right? So he never conquered anyone. He just liberated a lot of people. The guy had good press, everywhere he went, right? This guy was on top of it. And so, Cyrus dies. There's this kind of bloody, coup to sort of see who the next king's going to be. This guy named Darius, he rises to the top. He was also the great, but he wasn't as great as, Cyrus the Great, nor really Alexander the Great, but he was kind of great. Darius, he was the expansionist. So he took everything Cyrus did, and he took it to the absolute max. At this point, under Darius' reign, he took the Persian Empire to rival the height of the Empire of Rome in size and wealth. It's kind of debatable who was greater. It was in different times, but he really went for it. He built the city of Susa, which is where we see Nehemiah hanging out. If you guys remember a couple weeks ago, Brian, he talked about the story of Esther. That also takes place in Susa. He started building this city called Persepolis, which had underground irrigation and sewage systems. Like, that had never been done before. This guy, like, he was doing engineering stuff, combat. He connected the Nile River to the Red Sea with like an east-west canal by hand. Like, he was going for it. And then he came across the Greeks. And he was like, ooh, I'm going to conquer the unconquerable Greeks. I'm going to make this happen, right? He rolls into the city of Marathon. If you guys don't know this story, there's they're rolling into battle. The people are in Marathon. And this one guy named Phidippides, he gets to run 150 miles over the course of 2 days to Sparta to tell them they need help. He then runs back. He then runs about like 26.2 miles to deliver another message. This guy was moving, right? Like, so Phidippides, he was definitely wearing his PF flyers like at that time. Like, he was moving. And Darius would have won the Battle of Marathon, except for Phidippides' calves of iron. Like, he would have done it, but he failed. And so that's Darius. And then we've got Cyrus, we've got Darius, and then we've got King Xerxes, okay? And he tried, okay? He wasn't the great. He was just Xerxes because he wanted to be one of the big kids, right? He was a king in waiting for 36 years. Cyrus didn't say that there would be a successor, so Darius had to fight his way to the top. Darius picked Xerxes at an early age and was like, he's going to be king. So for 36 years, this spoiled kid is like waiting to be king and trying to be great. I assume he was spoiled, but we don't actually know that. But so this guy, and he's like, I'm going to be even better than Darius, right? He built a boat bridge connecting Asia and Europe. They like walked across water. They marched his entire army over these boat bridge things that he had made, like heavy armor. It was a very impressive bridge that he built. He attacks the Greeks, the whole the Spartans and the 300 sort of thing. That's King Xerxes, right? And so he's going to attack the Greeks. He's gonna succeed where Darius failed, and he gets totally duped. He's got this huge army. He gets sucked into Thermopylae, which is like a really skinny mountain pass. They said it was like a width of a chariot was about how big this passage was, right? So his whole army gets drummed down to almost a single file line, and so they can defend this gate. But Xerxes, he's angry at this point, right? He's pushing through. They're losing so many men. It nearly cripples his army. He punches his way through. They finally make it, and they get to the city of Athens, and he's duped again because they had abandoned the city. So he shows up, and everyone's gone. There's no one to conquer. His army's been crippled. And he's so angry. He commands Athens be burned to the ground. And then the next day, he wakes up and goes, that was dumb. Rebuild Athens. And like he's just so flippant. If you guys remember the story of Esther, she marries King Xerxes. That's the guy, right? And his temper, you see that in the story of Esther. If you guys remember, the queen before Esther, Queen Vashti, he wanted her to come to a party he was having. She didn't want to come. He was kind of being a jerk about it. So we're on her team really. And then she says no, and he goes fine, and he essentially excommunicates her from the royal family, and then regrets it later. But he can't take it back because he decreed it, and so now he's got to go do the whole find Esther thing. This guy. So he had rage issues, right? He's burning stuff, throwing wives out. He wasn't, that stable of a guy. And that is Artaxerxes' dad, okay? Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, he tried Artaxerxes, okay? And Artaxerxes comes on the scene, and he's looking at Cyrus and Darius going like, I can be like them. Dad, like Xerxes, you tried, you failed, I'm going to do it better. And he did in a lot of ways. Artaxerxes was the rejuvenator of this time period. He had a nickname. It was Longimanus, which it's like his right hand was longer than his left hand. And so Longimanus, it means great high fives in ancient Persian. If you didn't know that. But so he set to do what the others couldn't, right? He wanted to bring Persia back to the glory days. He finishes Darius' building of that city, Persepolis, with the underground sewage. Was super cool. He built the Hall of 100 Columns. We got a picture of that. There he is. He's got a strong nose and brow ridge. The other side is totally smashed off, so I guess he just only had half of a face. So yeah, there's kind of that in ruin. What it looked like more... 2,000 years ago? Yeah, there we go. So, and those columns, those are about like 100 or more feet tall, and they were perfect. How they had to make everything by hand and chisels and everything. And these columns, it was one of the wonders of the world at the time. They were perfect, and there were 100 of them, 100 feet tall. It was amazing. He totally nailed it. And then those pesky Greeks come in and then take over Egypt, which was under their control. And you can almost hear him grinding his teeth when you read about this, because it's like, oh my gosh, the Greeks again. My dad failed fighting the Greeks. Even Darius failed fighting the Greeks. Like Cyrus, he kind of won in some ways. Like, I can be great like Cyrus. I can do it. And so but he's smarter than everyone else, which is great for him. Because, like Egypt, they're being pesky and stuff because the Greeks took control. Jerusalem's pretty close to Egypt. And he's thinking, you know what? We've got a whole bunch of these, Jerusalem, these Jewish exiles with us. I'm going to send this guy Ezra to go back and sort of strengthen their people up, right? Yeah, teach your Torah, do whatever you want, but I want to have a friend for when I go to attack Egypt. And they started building a wall around Jerusalem, and he was like, whoa, don't do that. I don't want to have to conquer you and then conquer Egypt, so don't build a wall. You can't build a wall, in fact. I decree it. But unlike my dad, I'm going to give myself an out. His dad would just decree stuff. Artaxerxes, he was like, I decree you can't build a wall unless I say otherwise. Because, I might change my mind. Because, my dad changed his mind a lot. So he starts there. So Artaxerxes, this is the king that Nehemiah is the cupbearer to. All right? And so Nehemiah, he's a cupbearer to the king, and he is so upset. He is so hurting deeply for months. He is just hurting and thinking, and he is trapped. And he's going to work, and what that looks like is as a cupbearer, there's not just one, there's like a bunch of cupbearers. This guy's the king of Persia, so there's like a whole bunch of people around him. There's like the sommeliers off to the side, like pouring the wine. Nehemiah, he gets the wine, and he like takes it over to the king. But he's not going to be like, I'm great, look at me. It's more like it's this kind of like sheepish thing. He's got to look happy kind of, but if you can imagine, like, you can imagine that Nehemiah, he's got like long hair, a big beard, he's got like a turban on or something, and he was supposed to cover his mouth when he was coming over to the king. So when he had the wine, he would go over to the king with his mouth covered and just sort of like this. And so any interaction he would have with the king would literally be like the vision of like this much around his eyes, right? So he's almost completely boxed in, like coming to talk to the king. And so he's got to do that day after day, week after week, month after month, just hurting. And the worst thing that could have happened for Nehemiah happens, right? He's totally closed off in every way. And the king notices that something's wrong with him. And it's not a good thing. Nehemiah chapter 2. And it came about in the month of Nisan Ultima, in the 20th year... Thanks. 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that wine was before him, right? The sommeliers had poured it, and I took up the cup and I gave it to the king, right? So he's like slunking over to the king, hiding his face and everything, and he's hurting inside, that kind of twisting, like fierce pain. I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. He's like, it's been about 4 months, and I've been nailing it. It has been so hard. I've been breaking myself every day, but I've been doing it. Except for today. So the king said to me, why is your face sad though you're not sick? Somehow the king has a moment, I don't know, they lock eyes, and the king looks into Nehemiah's soul and just sees him breaking. And the king, when he says that, I bet everything stopped, right? He says, why are you sad? Why is your face sad though you're not sick? And everyone's like, because they're not alone. There's a bunch of cupbearers. There's like some guy fanning the king with like a palm frond, also covering his mouth. His like queen is next to him. He might have had like multiple queen, wife kind of things around. There were a lot of people. And everybody just, oh man, Nehemiah's totally going to die right now. Like, oh my gosh. And he looks a little bit closer. We kind of assume that. Why is your face sad though you're not sick? And you can almost like listen to him like kind of like peering off of his throne into Nehemiah's eyes. He says, this is nothing but sadness of heart. And Nehemiah is like, what? How did he know? And then then I was very much afraid. Like, you can't even like put words to that. It's just like terrified, like so stressed. He's like sweating immediately. Like, I was very much afraid. And this is where Nehemiah takes his first big risk. Up until now, he's been risking having a dream. He's been risking feeling and hurting for people that he cares about. But now he takes a big risk in front of the king. He shares his heart. And Nehemiah, at this point, for him to really open up like this to the king, that's borderline death sentence. Like, at this point, Nehemiah is kind of in a place where he's like, I just can't do it anymore. Maybe I am just supposed to die. And this is where we enter into what he says. He says, I said to the king, let the king live forever. Basically, like, you're super great. We could put the great after your name. Like, you're a cool guy. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies desolate and its gates have been consumed by fire? Of course I'm sad. My home is destroyed. My people are defenseless. Wouldn't you be? He takes another risk. He shares his heart. And the king says this. Then the king said to me, what would you request? And this isn't like a buddy-buddy like, oh man, that's so bad. I feel so bad for your people. Artaxerxes doesn't care. Like, he's like, oh, like, well, what do you want me to do about it? Essentially. And then we have Nehemiah, so I prayed to the God of heaven. I just imagine that moment of him standing there, everyone staring at him. He might be a terrible public speaker, who knows? Like, the queen is like looking over at him like weird, and he's just like, and then we have, so I prayed to the God of heaven, God, help! And it says, I said to the king, and then he shares his dream. If it please the king, and if your servant has found favor before you, send me to Judah, the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. That's my dream. Right? You can imagine the king like stops and like looks at him and then like sits, and everyone is just going like, Nehemiah's totally gonna die. Like all the other cupbearers are like, nope, like, not me. That I may rebuild it. All right? And the king says this. Then the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, he adds that in, so I feel like the queen was like looking at him or something. There's something about the queen. How long will your journey be, and when will you return? The cupbearers are like, whoa, what? And Nehemiah is like, oh, I've been holding my breath this whole time. Like, what? How long will your journey be, and when will you return? And here's his coup de grace. Here he risks sharing his whole plan with the king. Right? And he says all of his plan straight up. So the king knows it, like, you've been thinking about this, right? So he gives him the whole thing. He says, so it pleased the king to send me. I gave him a definite time. And he said I said to the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me for the governors of the provinces beyond the river, that they may allow me to pass through until I come to Judah. Step one, boom. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress, which is by the temple, for the wall of the city, and for the house which I'll go. And the king granted them to me because the good hand of my God was on me. Nehemiah risks everything in that moment because he risked his heart. He shared his heart, then his dream, and then finally his plan. Too often we share our plan without sharing our heart, and we get crushed. Nehemiah, he had his 6-step plan, right? And he had no way to accomplish it. But then all of a sudden, a simple conversation with the king. Step 1, escape Persia. He's let go. That's amazing. Step 2, get to Jerusalem. Oh my gosh, he's got a caravan to take him there and letters to get him through all of the gates and everything. He's got step 3, he's got to find an investor. Oh, the king's backing this? Boom. I got to find building materials and everything. Oh, like letter from king to Asaph for the timber? Awesome. Like he gets all of this stuff because God was working behind the scenes. Nehemiah, he was only able to accomplish his goal because he believed in a big God. Nehemiah's God was not small and limited and trapped. Nehemiah's God was powerful. Nehemiah's God cared about the strife of his people. Nehemiah's God was a big God. Without the means, training, or even the freedom to do so, Nehemiah dares to dream. He dares to feel. He dares to make plans with no start date, have ideas with huge gaps in them, and his thought was, I'll do my part, and God will do his. And he does. We won't go over the rest of the story right now, but he goes back. They build the wall. They do it. It's a great story. There was even some strife while he was over there. You guys should check it out. It's great. But I want to sit on that last moment there because there's a distinction that I want to make. As we think about, Nehemiah's dreaming, but what about my dreams, right? I was going to be a professional baseball player, an astronaut, a king of the world. I was going to be an actor, write a book, Commander Cool Comics, patent pending. What about those things? And a distinction I want to make is one that this pastor from back east named Andy Stanley, he makes this distinction, and I think it's great. He talks about the difference between what could be and what should be. So with what could be, that's usually where we dream. We think, oh, what could I be? What could I be? What could this be? How could this be different? We keep saying could. And he says the problem is that when you're saying could, you're usually, or not usually, often, you're ending up outside of God's plan for your life. Because that's kind of our big thing, right? Yes, God, I know that you can do it. I have the faith for it, but I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what's your will or not. And so how we get through that is instead of saying what could be, we say what should be. If you look at your family, your school, your work, your community, and you look around and say, oh, what could be? Well, this could be, this could be, this could be. Say what should be. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a big problem over here. That shouldn't be. You can look at your family and it's like, you know what? Like we should talk to each other. Like the fact that they haven't come to Thanksgiving in years, like that shouldn't be. You can look at your school and be like, school shouldn't be so crippling, stressful for me that I'm becoming depressed and having to take medication. That shouldn't be. You can look at work and be like, this should not be a place of deception and deceitful working. Like, that shouldn't be. Like, when we look at the should, we're more likely to find where God's plan really resides. And another thing Andy Stanley talks about is the difference between saying how and saying wow. How we should say wow instead of how. If you've ever had a dream and you've shared it with someone, I bet the first question they asked was, well, how would you even start that? Or, wow, I don't know how I would do that. Like, how would you get this? How would you do that? How? And your dream starts going, how, and it dies. Our dreams get howed to death all of the time, mostly by ourselves. We don't say wow, we say how. So if we choose wow instead, if you think, oh my gosh, like what if the thing that should be, my family, we started talking again. Wow, what would that now look like? What if I changed something with my school that I wasn't depressed anymore? Wow, what would that look like? Because that should be. Or like my work, like what if, wow. And that's how your dream grows. Nehemiah, he didn't how himself to death. He made his plan, and he said, God, here you go. And I bet he's just thinking, wow, that whole time. Wow, I can save my people with this wall. Wow, what God's going to do. My question that I want you guys to kind of sit on, that we're going to end with, is, will you risk dreaming again? Because we used to. This isn't something new for us. We used to have big dreams, and we've been howed to death over time. Will you choose wow instead of how? And risk feeling how Nehemiah felt. Risk dreaming what should be in my life, in my world. Will you risk dreaming again the way God wants you to? If you guys would pray with me real quick. Lord, God, thank you that we are here for a purpose. God, you put us on this earth in our situations, in our families, for a reason. It's not an accident that we're here, and God, we thank you for that. Lord, you have a design for our lives. You have a passion for us, and you've given us a passion for something. You've given us a dream. God, help us to know that you are guiding that dream. Lord, you knit us together in our mother's wombs. You guide our steps. You are here for the whole process. You're here for the long haul. God, help us to say wow and not say how. Father, we thank you for the love that you have for us. We thank you that you are a big God. I pray that you would give us the strength and the courage to risk dreaming the way you want us to dream.